And as leaders, we have to be adaptable, flexible to do things sometimes that have never been done before. And as leaders and ever learners, we are growing that ever learning muscle to do that which we have never done. That's that adaptability to the new situation as an ever learner.
See challenges as opportunities to improve. I think so often we don't do that. It's easy to have a fixed mindset, right? Either I know it or I don't, either
Yeah.
I'm good enough or I'm not, as opposed to a growth mindset of I don't know that yet. Welcome to Science of Leadership, the podcast dedicated to helping you become a better leader. Here, you'll gain valuable knowledge, hear inspiring stories, and learn the scientific principles that promote exceptional leadership. I'm Tom Collins, your host, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this journey to becoming a better leader. Today's episode is focused on what I like to refer to as being an ever learner. That's someone who's always continued to grow and learn. To explore this topic, I'm honored to be joined by Lieutenant General retired Scott Dingle, the 45th Surgeon General of the United States Army and Commanding General, United States Army Medical Command. Lieutenant General Dingle led during times of both peace and crisis, including guiding Army medicine through the COVID-19 pandemic. A graduate of Morgan State University with a Master's in Military Arts and Sciences and multiple advanced degrees, he's a leader who has exemplified resilience, compassion, and vision throughout his career. As we discuss the idea of ever learning, we'll unpack what it means to be an ever learning leader, why it matters, and how each of us can put into practice to grow into the leaders our teams will need tomorrow. General Dingle, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for your service to our nation.
Thank you, Tom, for having me. It's an honor to be on here. And I tell you, just excited to see what you're doing. And just this opportunity to talk about leadership is just excites me and is near and dear to my heart. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, sir. Well, as someone with 3 degrees, graduate degrees, I know you're someone who's committed to continuing to grow and learn. To begin with, can you kind of describe to me what it means to you to be an ever learner?
Absolutely. An ever learner. Tom, to me, an ever learner refers to someone who has the mindset and the commitment and the practice of continuously seeking knowledge, skills, experience, leadership nuggets to throw in the rucksack without stop. Keyword is continuous. Didn't say temporarily, a temporary learner or intermittent learner, but continuous ever learner because it indicates that it's a continual process. It's a continuum that doesn't stop. It's a journey, not a destination of learning, of taking those things, those experiences, and applying them to our lives so that we become better leaders, not perfect leaders, because there's no perfect leader, but yet the quintessential leader as it comes to us as we strive to reach that journey, or rather travel along that journey of leadership. What also comes to mind, I would add, is we're traveling along that ever learning journey of leadership, there's a requirement of what I always tell my leaders of being an adaptable and flexible leader, because as I'm going through the process of continual ever learning, there's going to be times that unexpected turns come up along the journey. Wait a minute, I thought that this ever learning thing was straight. I got it, that it's continual, that it's a journey, not a destination, but I thought it was just a straight thing. No, no, no. It's filled with twists, it's filled with turns that requires us as leaders to adapt to situations, adapt to crisis, adapt to chaos, because it's not a cookie cutter straight line approach to the learning, but it's going to take adaptable and flexible learners to get to that journey of leadership excellence.
You hit on something that's so you said it a couple times. It's a journey, not a destination. I think that we can be fooled or, I don't know, seduced is the word I think, with this idea that when we become leaders, we can that we've reached the destination, right? And just as you say, I think we've got to reframe our approach so that it isn't getting there, but it's working toward this ideal, leadership sort of competence or what have you. Because when we think we've made it, I think that's when we failed.
100%, 100%, because we never make it. A lot of young leaders asking me, hey, General Dingle, how did you make it to, being the leader that you are? And how did you make it to the top? How did you make it to be three-star? I said, well, I didn't make it. I said, I'm still on a path, to leadership. I love leadership. I love mentorship. I love pouring into them. So they're asking me, and I said, well, it's a journey. I said, we all are on this track, running a race, not against other competitors, but against our own standards and leadership excellence striving, and you never stop. I said, I'm still traveling to get there. I said, I'm not there. It's not a stop. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. And that's what it takes, because today's leadership octagon, you got to be able to wrestle with new challenges, and you can't use old leadership methodologies that are not applicable to today's generations or today's problems to win, to effectively lead through crisis, chaos, change, challenges. That takes a continual traveling. So I'm not there. None of us are there. I look at some of my mentors and leaders, and they tell me the same thing, yes, sir. And again, I look to them like, man, y'all are the statue. No, no, Scott, I'm not the statue. I said, I'm walking the same journey that you're walking. Let's walk together.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your perspective on that. I think we resonate on it completely, and maybe because we are ever learners in a real sense.
Yes.
As you look back over your career, do you have a good story that kind of demonstrates what it looks like to be an ever learner?
What comes to mind is, two times real quick. And the first one is Second Lieutenant Dingle. When Second Lieutenant Scotty Dingle, came into the Army, from Baltimore, Maryland, they sent me to, the basic course, officer basic course in San Antonio, Fort Sam Houston. I'm a second lieutenant, and they're teaching us all this stuff about being leaders. So we're equipping our kit bags with this knowledge, and I'm like, okay, man, I'm ready to lead my platoon, and it's our first, position of military leadership. And I'm like, okay, goodness, we get there, and it's everyone's big thing about your first day on the job, and you're the platoon leader of these 45 men and women, these soldiers who are going to look to you, the leader. And they taught us all this stuff on, okay, here's what it is, and here's what it looks like, here's what you're going to do. And then so you got your stuff, and you got your degree, and you go there to get in front of your platoon for the first time, and you think that you have it, and that you arrived at that post camp station, and you give them that talk, and all of a sudden all these things hit you, and requirements and tasks, and your eyes like, oh, wait a minute, this wasn't what they taught me to be the leader of this company or platoon. And adapted quickly, and I said, oh wow, that didn't teach me to be a learner, the leader, but it just gave me the foundation to build upon. They didn't tell me that it's a requirement to build upon the foundation of leadership education, to adapt to your leadership, your platoon now, and to grow. And so I quickly learned that, oh wow, after arrival, man, I had to listen, to learn, to grow, to explore, to educate myself through the training manuals for my platoon, and to learn the requirements and task condition standards, and listening to those that are on the team, and using resources to train my platoon for their combat mission. I didn't know, I thought, but you quickly build upon that foundation, which gets back to our initial discussion, that man, it is a journey, man. Building this building of leadership on the foundation that you have is continuous. The brick and mortar is, you're still building. It doesn't stop, and you got to keep growing as you grow up in leadership and in life. Fast forward 30 years later, now Lieutenant Dingle is Lieutenant General Dingle, 3 stars, and now just assuming as the Army Surgeon General. And it was the same thing. Whoa, no one prepared me for this. I have to now adapt to the situation again, identify requirements, and solve problems of leadership, and learn. Adaptable, flexible, and continue to build, to read, to attend the schools, the education, the leader development, to help prepare me for a foundation at another level of that floor that I still had to build leadership lessons through ever learning on. And so the key point, like we talked about, Tom, is that it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop, no matter where you're at. In order to be successful, you have to continually prepare and take on and read and expand your leadership bandwidth to handle where you're at right now. Because the problems as a second lieutenant in that platoon, that ambulance platoon, now the Surgeon General, and handling those issues, I can't use yesterday's leadership nuggets. It's a help foundation to build upon, but it's a whole different set, right now, that I had to adapt to now as a 3 star, the Surgeon General and Commanding General United States Army Medical Command to to be successful. And that was only through ever learning. If I would have stopped and turned off the key, like, oh man, I'm done. All right, let me pull out the platoon MTP from 1980 something, it wouldn't have worked. Ever learning.
Yeah. Let me pause here for a second and remind our listeners that my book, The 4 Stars of Leadership, is now available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and essentially all online outlets. It's getting rave reviews, and I'm certain you will find it not only informative, but also inspiring. so I hope you'll order your copy today. Now let's get back to this interesting conversation. So valuable, and you're putting in the context of your experience as a Butterball, second lieutenant all the way up to 3 stars, that it is a continual growth process. As you were talking, I just kept having ringing in my head, like, and I don't want it to stop. Maybe that's because 'cause I'm strange, right? But this idea that I'm just gonna stop learning, I'm just gonna say, "Okay, I've reached it," like, that is really unappealing to me. Maybe that's a character flaw, somebody might say. I say it's a, character, benefit, but, feature, if you will, of my operating system, but is exciting to me to keep learning. It's so important to me to keep growing. If you're not learning, you're not leading.
No, agree 1,000%, Tom. Because what it gets to is, as leaders, we have goals, and as you have goals in leadership and in business and school and in life and everything that you do, you want to be successful. But in order to be successful, you got to have, when you said that, the first thing that came to my mind was drive and passion. I have that drive, that passion to be a good leader. To be a good leader, I got to continually feed the beast because the beast is hungry. I want more. I want to be a leader. Okay, all right, this is gone. Okay, now I want to lead here, and even if it's just my family, I want to be the best husband, dad that I can be, and I got to
Mhm.
continue to lead and learn. But it's a drive and a passion of want to be successful. And everybody may not have that drive and passion. And those are folks who may readily identify and say, "Look, man, I don't want to be a leader. Man, I don't want to, have the burden of responsibility of that mantle, of leadership that is carried, and that's perfectly fine. That may not be their character, and they step back. I submit they still have a level of leadership, whether personal
Mhm.
responsibilities, with family and whatever that they're doing on the job, but it may not be that magnitude. Their drive and passion may not be as strong or as high, but that hunger, you know, is what drives us to learn more. And even when you don't want to, now as I'm in retirement, my wife, is beating me up. You went back to school? I got enough degrees, and I know, I've been putting it off, and I know I'm going to do it. I know I have to do it. I want to do it, but man, I had a break for a while. And I got to do no dissertations and no thesis, and man, do I want to do that? And I really love doing it. I said, but all this
Mhm.
other stuff that I'm doing, like I got to do this and speak here, and and then you got a call on the university. They're asking you the semester may start. All right, I'm signing up. All right, I'm gonna hold off though. Hey, General Dingle. No, General Dingle. What's the late 3 of October? Okay, 3 of October is when I'll start. I went the last semester, so I can change, but I want to do it. You want to, but deep down inside, it's a fire and it's a passion, and I got to feed the beast of ever learning.
Mhm.
And do this next level.
Yeah, I mean, for me, a lot of people think I'm crazy. Like I'm a physician, got a doctorate in medicine, of course. Then I decided I would get a master's in leadership, and now I'm enrolled in a PhD in leadership. Because I mean, like, it's really fun to me, to keep
Yes.
learning and discovering and growing, and I get these ideas, and the book, over here was born out of all that work and that mentality of ever learning,
Hmm.
and I'm a better person. As you said, better father, better husband. I think just generally a better person because of those things, and I know I'm not there yet.
Yes, yes. I think as we go through life, it's like, we all are the leadership pencil that we have. And then at times, when you keep leading, you're using that pencil, it gets dull. And then you're like, oh my
Mm,
God, I got to sharpen this thing. And it gets dull. And that passion, what? You going back to get a master's of leadership, Tom? What are you crazy? No, it's my leadership pencil. I got to sharpen. And
yeah.
any mode and opportunity to sharpen that leadership pencil to provide the excellence to others, those we lead, our loved ones, our teammates. It feels good. The pencil is sharpened, and again, I know my pencil getting dull and doing the same thing, getting this PhD in leadership, starting because I got to continually to grow because you can write but so long where that there's more out there. And when there's more out there, I want to keep writing for others because others are reading what you write or watching how you lead and the
Mhm.
things that you're doing. And any way to sharpen that tool is a better leader to those that you lead.
Man, I like that analogy as you were talking about. I want to riff on it just a little bit because I was thinking somebody out there is gonna be like, "Well, if you sharpen your pencil, it'll get shorter and it'll run out." And I thought about the quill pen, right? Like, it's the same idea, right? Like, you're writing, but you run out of ink, right? But you got a well over there, and that well is learning. You put that quill in there, you take up some of that ink, and you write, and then it's like, okay, it's time for me to go back to the well, and you do that, and and then you can write and write and write and keep writing, and you don't ever run out per se. I think that's brilliant. This idea of the writing instrument.
But then adding on top of that, it's mechanical pencil. And all right, I got the lead that I've secured through processes so I can keep writing to change the lead to
Yeah,
keep writing. And then, for the legacy, pencils, all right. Once it gets down to here, this is your life. This is
yeah,
your lifespan. And your lifespan lasts but so long on the continuum of life. And so your opportunity to lead with your
yeah,
pencil is going to be as long as your life is there. When the pencil ends, again, our lives are not finite physically in this world. All right, we're done. But while we are here,
yeah,
the time that I'm here, man, I'm gonna write the best that I can. Because like I again tell my leaders, the rest is yet to be written. That term, that
mhm,
phrase, by you. So write while you can. While the pencil is still here.
yeah. I love it. That's great. I have to use that idea in the future. It's really good. Well, we kind of described what it looks like. We've kind of started moving into why it's so important that we continue to be ever learning. From your perspective, do you have a good story that demonstrates where your commitment to being an ever learner actually translated into operational success? Had you not been that way, it may have been a failure.
Oh, absolutely. And maybe not necessarily a failure, but maybe not far along the path of success. And the first thing that comes to mind is as a major attending Command General Staff College and the opportunity to attend the School of Advanced Military Studies, SAMS, at Fort Leavenworth. Me being a medical service corps officer, Army medicine was not allowed at the time to attend SAMS, and it was just opening up, and so I'm at the cusp of the door, knocking to attend and apply. All my peers, even other students, like, man, why in the world would you want to go to School of Advanced Military Studies? And I think, oh man, just the opportunity to just study leadership and the operational art of planning and problem solving. Man, I want to do that. Again, like we talked, got to feed the beast because you want to do more. And so I went ahead and applied and was blessed to be selected to be the first medical person to attend the School of Advanced Military Studies, which produced a Master's in Military Art and Science from the Advanced Military Studies program. More learning and studying, and so I had a passion not to just settle for the intermediate level education at Fort Leavenworth, but I wanted more. What you need another master's for? You already got two, three, three. Well, no, I want to learn as a leader and be a better planner and an operator and understand the art and study the art of leadership. And so, went through that year, was the first one to be selected, went through, and then was blessed to take that experience of being the first medical person to go through SAMS to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Find myself now in 18th Airborne Corps as a combat planner. My bosses said, when I was Scott, you're going to be both, the TSG at the time, General Pete, you're going to be both the medical planner for the 44th Medical Command, the Corps Surgeon's Office, and then also 18th Airborne Corps. We get there, and the CG's like, no, Scotty, you work for me. Go to Afghanistan. Go to Afghanistan. And I'm now on the ground in Afghanistan in the early days of combat plans. And I'm like, oh, wow. In the CJ5, and they're like, Scotty, you have phase four of of Operation of OEF or Enduring Freedom, I think it was called. So I'm in Afghanistan and phase four. And now I got to reach back to all the education foundation that was taught to me through SAMS, on top of being the medical person, learning the SAMS education. And now you're in Afghanistan doing phase four. First, I had a complex. I said, wait a minute. Why am I phase four? Why can't I do combat operations like Johnny, the infantryman and the Marine and the Ranger guy? I want to do phase two and three. Oh, you give the medical guy phase four. Okay, I got it. So I had a little chip. Well, phase four, fast forward even more, ends up being the transition phase of the entire theater, provincial reconstruction teams, the PRTs, and so me assembling for the theater, all the PRT sites going out to Bamia, where things were bombed, and I'm sitting there putting together the PRT with the State Department and Special Forces and Forcecom and CENTCOM, and it's me, putting these plans, together that I learned through a process where some stopped and didn't want to take that challenge of advanced military studies. Me being that desire to be an ever learner, like, no, I want more. And then that created an opportunity now for operational and tactical implementation of the education that you learn. And this here, I'm on the ground in Afghanistan actually doing the entire plan. Fast forward, combat operations close, and what happens during phase 4? After I leave, oh man, I wrote that. Was able to develop that and led that plan. But if I was not an ever learner and had stopped or had settled for less, you can be an ever learner, but yet you may not aspire and run as fast as you're supposed to run. If I'd have ran slow and settled, you know what, I'm gonna take a break. I'm not. I would have missed an opportunity to apply a level of learning and education that very few people are fortunate or blessed to receive. And it was a tremendous experience that just was like, blew my mind. It was amazing.
I mean, that's a great example, and I'm reminded of some General Dave Rodriguez told me when I interviewed him for my study of 4 stars. He said, "What you were yesterday is not good enough for tomorrow," and that's hard, and that may seem harsh, but I think it's 100% correct. No matter what we're doing, no matter the leadership context, we have something or someone we're competing against. That may be another company, a nation, a disease in medicine, or any host of other competitors or adversaries, but we can be guaranteed there's something or someone out there that's standing in the way of us accomplishing our goals. And when we as leaders become complacent, settle for good enough, I think is how you said it, right?
Yes,
And we're
yes,
convinced we have it all figured out and don't need to keep improving, don't need to be growing. That adversary isn't taking a day off. It's like you'll remember this from Rocky 4, right? Like if you think about Rocky 4, the Russian boxer, right? Ivan Drago, he never took the day off. He was always in some kind of lab where they had him hooked up to something. He was always in the gym. He was always becoming stronger or faster. And to beat him, Rocky had to really put in the extra effort. He never was resting. He was never settling for good enough because he knew that Drago was out there getting better. And I think the same is true for our lives as leaders.
yes,
Whoever or whatever, for our listeners and for us, whoever your Ivan Drago is, you can bet they aren't taking a day off, and neither can we if we're going to continue to compete.
absolutely. It's evolutionary. You can't settle for yesterday's victory in the ring when you got tomorrow's opponent. And so absolutely never took a day off preparing for the next fight. And the same way is with leadership. It's evolutionary. The time and the day that we stop evolving as leaders, we become extinct because things change just like
Mm.
dinosaurs so fast. And if we don't change, we become irrelevant. Are you wrestling yesterday's issues when today's problems are for today, not yesterday? Change is man. If we never changed from who we were 10 years ago, we wouldn't be where we are today. 20 years ago. One of my sayings that I love is, change. A bend in the road is not the end of the road unless you fail to make the change. As leaders, man, it's continual. Every day, you got to build upon it. You got to change the approach to get better so that you can beat the opponent, so that you can win or master, the program. But it's evolutionary where we just don't rest or stop.
And that just reiterates the importance of us being ever learners. And now's the time I sort of usually will dive into some science, like what have
Mhm,
studies shown? And as you might imagine, there's plenty of science to back this idea up.
mhm.
When we maintain an ongoing practice of learning, it enhances our technical skills, improves our interpersonal skills, and it even, as people probably know, prevents cognitive decline, which we're
Yes.
seeing more and more, in the general population. And so I can highlight a few studies. There are a bunch of them, but listeners will be familiar with Amy Edmondson's work, where she found that teams with leaders who model curiosity and openness to learning develop higher psychological safety, and that increases collaboration and innovation. Carol Dweck, whose work on the growth mindset is phenomenal. I highly recommend her book on the subject. But her renowned research demonstrated that leaders who approach challenges with a growth mindset foster resilience and performance in their organizations. And similarly, Heifetz, Greshau, and Linsky argued that the ability to adapt and continuously learn is essential for leading in rapidly changing environments. You were hitting on that. Is there any more rapidly changing environment than what we're facing in these current days?
Hmm.
So leaders who are ever learners not only improve their own capabilities to lead, but they serve as role models for those that they lead in the same way. And so there are a couple of studies I can highlight there. In 2021, Samantha Kranz and her colleagues found that when leaders are dedicated to learning, they
Hmm.
foster organizations dedicated to learning, which leads to improved capabilities and performance throughout the organization. Additionally, a 2009 study by Gong, Huang, and Farr in Academy of Management Journal showed that leaders who maintain a learning orientation positively influence team creativity and long-term performance. So together, these findings really demonstrate strongly that ever learning is not just a nice trait, but it's a fundamental to leadership effectiveness.
Yeah. No, in fact, it is 100% true. The science is becoming quickly the art because everything that is said is spot on, but yet now we have to absorb and take it and now apply it to the
Mm.
canvas that is in front of us, our art, taking that science and those studies to be, my God, quintessential leaders, or, I like to say rather, leaders of excellence, leaders of
Mhm.
excellence.
You hit on something that's kind of a hidden, at least hidden, I think, to some people who just see the title of the podcast, the science of leadership. But really,
Yes.
my goal here is to weave in the science with the art, right?
Yes.
That's why we talk about the stories and what is, how does this look in real life and all that. But you're right. I mean, it is taking those principles. What are the proven principles? How do they translate, as you say, onto the canvas,
Yes.
to become the art of your own leadership?
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Lieutenant General Dingle, we've defined whatever learning is and explored why it matters. Now I'd like to turn to the practical,
Mm.
sort of tips that our folks can do. What steps would you say leaders can use to build a habit, exercise the muscle of ever learning?
The foundation to build upon would first be is make sure that you're hungry, and the fact that you got to feed yourself when it comes to leadership and being an ever learner. With that said, of you have to be hungry, to feed yourself, to nourish your leadership muscles. You got to read, you got to study, you got to observe. The first one you mentioned, I heard you say the word, I would say is, you got to be curious, have a curiosity or a strong desire to explore new ideas and concepts in areas of interest. You have to, also be an adaptable leader. You got to be adaptable because you can't just be rigid to change or to leadership, because we become combat ineffective or ineffective when we're inflexible, when we're not adaptable. There's this one story I'll share quickly. I had just become the Surgeon General, and we just finished COVID, and we were going through the largest hospital merger in our nation. The Army, Navy, Air Force systems with the Defense Health Agency oversight. Hugest merger in our country. As we were going through this merger, the presidential commission, came to interview me. They did all the surgeon generals, and they come now do the big green machine, Army, and the interview went for an hour, went great. Thought I was hitting it out the park. It's about leadership, what was going on. We need your insight, General Dingle, and I'm hitting it. They're like, yeah, yeah. I said, okay, yeah, I'm doing it. They had the tape. Oh yeah, absolutely. And Madam Secretary was closing it out, and she said, General Dingle, anything else? I said, no, ma'am. And then one of the members, retired admiral, said, Madam Secretary, can I ask Scotty something? And she gave him a statement. She said, oh yeah, absolutely. Please go on, Admiral. And she said it was Admiral Brown. Admiral retired Brown said, Scotty, you talk about leadership and what's going on with this merger. You said this about unity of effort and leadership and unity of command, and you meant this. I said, yes, ma'am, that was right. And Scotty, you said this about it, and I said, ma'am, that's right. And then she said, Scotty, you also said this about the leadership, and I know what you mean. I said, ma'am, that's right. And so I thought, man, I could hit it out the park. Man, this is gonna go great. She sees it how we see it. And she said, Scotty, as a leader, I know exactly what you mean because when I was, the commander of Nav Fleet Pacific, as a 4-star, I said the same thing you said when it talked about the leadership, what was going on in different services and in the Pacific, and I told my boss the same thing. I was like, "Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am," and she said, "You know what he told me?" I said, "What, man? What did he say?" He said, "Well, Admiral, if you can't ride 2 horses, it may be time to go home." I said, ma'am, I'm riding 2 horses, and what her point was is that her boss told her that she was telling me that change is going to come. And as leaders, we have to be adaptable, flexible to do things sometimes that have never been done before. And as leaders and ever learners, we are growing that ever learning muscle to do that which we have never done. That's that adaptability to the new situation as an ever learner, as we apply it. And so the next thing would be open-mindedness, because we got to be open-minded to the new ideas and receptive of viewpoints that are different or that we may never heard of. In this case, I had not an army. Hey, one leader,
Mhm.
Scotty, this is your new time. So you better ride 2 horses, or ma'am, I'm riding. And I rode 2 horses. And so now the self-reflection of the experiences that you go through as an ever learner, and then applying those and seeking and looking at what worked, what didn't work, getting rid of what didn't work. But as I ride these 2 horses in this new ever learning environment, man, here's what I need to do. And then now train the trainer. Now take it to my other leaders, my generals and commanders on, hey, look, here's what you have to do to be successful. It's resources, be resourceful in looking at books, online courses, workshops, or anything to help in that process. But then, last one I say would be persistence. Mastery takes time and effort.
Mm.
Mastery takes time and effort. Being an ever learner takes time and effort to master the point of that learning is continuous and to be the best learner that you can be for those you lead, whether at home or on the job. It still takes time, and so you got to invest that time in there, as you're feeding yourself.
Mm. Those are great. Thank you for sharing those and bringing in that story from Admiral Brown. That also was so additive. As I was thinking about these things, I like to try to crystallize a list for our folks. I usually enumerate them and so that people have a take-home package. And I feel like you hit on a number of the same ones that I kind of came up with. The number one that I had was adopt a growth mindset. And so you were saying about
Yes,
being open-minded, right? So
yes,
see see challenges as opportunities to improve. I think so often we don't do that. We have it's easy to have a fixed mindset, right? Either I know it or I don't. Either
yeah,
I'm good enough or I'm not, as opposed to a growth mindset of I don't know that yet, right? And so, number one, adopt a growth mindset. Number two, seek feedback often. Actively ask peers and those we lead for candid input, and be willing to receive it in a way that's good. Um, I think it was General McKenzie when I interviewed him. He was talking about don't bite people's head off when they give you,
mm,
negative feedback, right? Because then they won't give you the feedback that you need to do a good job. So always be seeking that feedback. You mentioned read broadly and deeply, stay curious. That's about leadership and science in the world, right? Like, what can you learn today? I think that's a good one. That leads me into the next one, which is reflect regularly. Take time to analyze experiences and extract lessons. I remember interviewing Admiral Jim Hogg, who unfortunately passed away in January of this year, but just a wonderful man. And he said that every day, at the end of the day, he would review his experiences from the day as a leader, and he would say, "What can I take away from today? How can I be better tomorrow because of those things?" And so, taking the time to reflect regularly, it may not necessarily be every day like Admiral Hogg, but with some cadence, do that. I think that's valuable. Surround yourself with mentors and diverse voices.
yes,
Broaden your perspective, right? We all have this
hmm,
narrow perspective. We see things from our perspective, and we often think that that's fully encompassing, but it's not at all, right? And so the value of having that input is tremendous. And I think that once we recognize that, I can speak to this from my own experience, then it's really hard not to have it. Like you begin to seek it out more and more once you have gotten that, because now you realize you're so much more effective when you can bring together all these different perspectives and get a better sense of the reality.
yeah,
And so I think that those people that don't surround themselves with mentors and diverse voices that are really cutting themselves off at their own knees, as
yes,
leaders. And then the final one that I had was, this is a hard one. Practice humility. Acknowledge what you don't know, and model openness to others. So I remember, a little confessional here. A good friend in medical school, his name was Eric Beauvoir, and he one time he said, "You know what your problem is? You're never wrong." That's what he told me. And it wasn't that I was never wrong, right? That wasn't what he was saying. He was saying I thought I was never wrong. And that stung, man. That stung so bad. But I'll tell you, that moment, I mean, I remember where I was standing, what we were doing when he told me that. And that was not 30, it was 28 years ago or something. That moment, I still remember it because I think that moment was instrumental in changing the trajectory of my life. Because in that moment, I did hear that diverse voice, that different perspective, and I said, "I can't say that he's wrong. I've gotta change," right? And so that was a jumping off point for me to become, I think I'm not there yet, as we talked about early on in the podcast. I'm not there yet at all, but man, I'm so much further along than I was, and that moment was an instrumental point where I was like, "Ah, yeah, I gotta change that." So those are the ones that I came up with as I was thinking about it.
I smile so much because that last, especially on the last one, I tell, a lot of people ask me about my leadership style, like, man, Joe Dingle, man, how did you become like that? And it was learning. I said, but it was more so from how I grew up and playing sports because, I've always been a, a good athlete and, always the captain of the team. And with the team, it's about always building the team and teamwork. Like the Wonder Pets. I tell my kids, what's the word? What's going to work? Teamwork. And as I was in college playing for Morgan State, free safety and great season, and I had such a passion. You talk about your passion for leadership, my passion for the game, and leading the conference, one of the conference leaders in tackles and up to interceptions and fastest thing, and I had a passion. And one day, we were practice, and my roommate was defensive end, and Mike Butts, and we were in practice, and the thing that I had to control was that passion. You talked about that humility. It wasn't that I was arrogant. No, not at all. But my passion was just so over flowing that we was in the huddle and we're playing. You make a play, something happens, and I'm like, doggone it, the linebacker, you know, Bruce, what do you do? Don't miss your, no, hit your blocks. What do you do? You missed the block. You missed the tackle. What do you? I need you to do this and that. That's right. And in every play, it was Scotty. Come back to huddles, you're gonna hear from Scott. Scotty, doggone it, Keith, you better pick up your, you know. And my defensive end told me one night, we came from practice, we was in our rooms. He said, Scotty. I said, what's up, Mike? He said, come on, man, you got to stop. Stop what? Man, every time we come back to the huddle, something happens wrong. You jump down everybody's throat, and everybody knows that they don't have to hear from you. And man, they want to come back to the huddle because you're gonna jump on them. I was like, oh man. I said, and if you know you love, but you can't. I was tearing them up because of that passion. I said, oh man, and I listened. I said, you know what? You're right. Which had brought me this phrase that I always told my leaders, in Army medicine, that as you drink from the cup of success, um, home on the job in leadership, as you drink from the cup of success, don't become intoxicated with the hubris therein. And you may not even realize it, but you got to watch those little things because it impacts others. It impacts others. And so you have to watch the perception that as you walk this leadership path, on how those that are along the margins watching you walk the path because they see you, and and your example means a lot, as well as those that are walking the path behind you, how you're impacting them with your leadership. So that ever learning leader has to be self-reflective, looking back, like you mentioned, reflecting regularly to analyze, well, man, what just happened, what did you do or didn't do, even though you didn't mean it. I'm as smart as now, but here's the perception. And so it's, man, that self and introspective look is sometimes tough, but it is so necessary so that we can adjust our temperatures, and acclimate to those that we lead.
I don't know if there's a better way to end out our conversation, General Dingle. It's really been a pleasure to speak with you, have you on the Science of Leadership today. Your example being an ever-learning leader is inspiring, and I know our listeners will walk away challenged to invest in being better tomorrow than they are today. So thanks for joining me on the Science of Leadership.
Tom, thank you. It was an honor. Thank you for what you're doing to the leadership landscape, pouring into us all as ever learning leaders, and those who are just finding out what ever learning leadership is. What you're doing and taking the time to help others is good stewardship of the leadership mantle. And so I salute you for the great stuff that you're doing. Thank you for this opportunity. It's been a blast, just to talk about it. I could talk all day because leadership is a journey, not a destination. And so I thank you for helping me and us all with our journeys to leadership.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Science of Leadership. We hope today's discussion has inspired you and given you valuable insights to help you become a better leader. Remember, leadership is about helping those we lead do great things. It's a journey of continual growth and learning. When we embrace that journey with curiosity, courage, and humility, we can confront challenges, overcome barriers, and foster environments where everyone can succeed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow or subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with others who are passionate about leadership. Until next week, keep leading with character, competence, caring, and communication. This is Tom Collins. Let's keep growing.